Good afternoon, world. Welcome to Tragedy and Hope. It's been a long time since I had Richard Grove on the show, and I'm very happy of always to have him back on the show. And Rich, I don't know if you saw the article I sent you on your friend there, Mr. Greenberg over at AIG going before the courts or not.
No, I didn't get this. I didn't get a chance to check email. Yeah, what was the article about?
Well, it wasn't about his crimes on 9/11, but it was some other fraud.
Hi, this is Maria Heller. If you're enjoying this show, please consider listening to the rest of it, along with hundreds of other hours of education, by a small subscription on my site. Get over to maria.net, meria.net. You are the only thing that supports this show. There's no corporate control, and there's plenty of education on site, so please consider either a subscription or a donation to keep the work going. There are too many alternative voices out there that are being silenced because of lack of support. So if you don't want MSM to be the only mind-controlling news out there, please consider supporting the people that support you, and help us all save something for the future for our children.
So I don't even
remember
so because the news keeps me way too busy to stay on one story anymore.
Oh, yeah, totally. But in the case of Greenberg and those guys and the bailouts, I think it's a case of they discovered that instead of trying to hide what they're doing, just do it in public and make up some lame excuse like, oh, these are bailouts and we have to pay to keep these banks in business. And what most people don't know is that I think, taxpayers across America have to pay like $93 billion a year to keep those banks in business.
It's just ridiculous. Anyway, Rich, you haven't been on the show in a long time. I'm sure you're following especially as a New Yorker, with the New York bombing that happened last week. At the same time, of course, we got nailed for illegal bombing in Syria and killing Syrian troops. So I said, wow, this looks like a cover-up, looked like Boston all over again.
Yeah, I try to keep an open mind during these things, during these events as you see them unfold, and I don't really keep up with mainstream media, but I do tune in to see what they're telling people when these events happen. I spent several years in New York City, and it's tragic to see these events going on there. But I think that when you find out that the people that they're catching have already had meetings and contacts and that are known to the FBI over the years, and this forms a pattern in the post 9/11 world. I think 14 or 15 out of the 22 so-called terrorist attacks have all those guys, the people blamed, had direct contacts with the FBI.
Exactly. So, well, the other thing I found interesting, while they're blowing away black people in this country like nobody's business this week, one guy who was sitting in his car reading a book, who was disabled, waiting for his kid to come to the car, just got killed. In North Carolina's on fire with protest. Then another killing I reported on, the cop gave the guy literally 1 second before he shot him. And you look at the New York bomber, and they managed to shoot him in the leg, I think, and keep him alive. Doesn't that raise questions right off the top of your head?
Well, and what you're seeing out there across these many cases is the confluence of police paranoia and overtraining and training in such a way that it might not treat other people as human beings and these sort of things where it's like you're making snap decisions because you think your life's in danger. Yes, I understand that perspective, but you also have to understand the perspective that you shouldn't be shooting unarmed people in the process of being scared unless you're objectively faced with something that threatens your life. Right? So there's like a fine line, and I think that laws and lawyers get in the middle of all that and make it a purposely ambiguous area, and then symptoms of that are people being shot by people in authority all over this country, and it seems to be a growing trend, though you also have to consider that there's you're more likely to know about it when it happens these days because of social media. So, the internet age, we're getting a lot more information about what's going on. But, these types of events, authority abusing the people that it's supposed to serve has been going on all over the world for a long time.
Exactly. And I mean, it's getting ridiculous. And it's like, I'm looking at, especially the people in North Carolina, really going at it against the cops. The cops are hitting them with beanbags and, rubber bullets and whatnot. What about the fact that under Obama, he's given the police department so much military equipment? Don't you think that changes the cops' mindset?
Well, it does, and some of the first things I saw when they shot that the terrorist from the New York, New Jersey bombings. As soon as you heard the fire department appealing for Homeland Security money and grants, and it was all about getting more federal money into those localities. And I said, that's like, I just reflected on like looking at the big picture. It's like, look, people like George Soros and the Anglo-American establishment want America broken. They want us in a civil war. How are they going to do that? Well, they can put people, color against color and discrimination. You can put people of certain ethnic groups against the police and try to drive a wedge in that way. And what they're trying to do is break us up. And I think we all need to step back from the emotional nature of these events, look at it objectively, and it's like these people will only exercise as much power as we let them, and they will only be as corrupt as we let them. So I think we need to make freedom a priority, and in order for us to get strength, we've got to give strength to each other and not try to take it away.
Right. Well, you got to look at, too, Donald Trump. Look at how much hatred and racism he's been whipping up, to where, his supporters seem to be the ones that, it seems, when I get these nasty stories of people assaulting other people, setting a Muslim woman on fire, beating, two Muslim women in New York, almost toppling their baby carriage. How responsible do you think Donald Trump is for trumping up the hatred out there?
Well, I think that definitely Donald Trump is somebody who needs to be responsible for their actions, just like everyone else. But we also need to question the incendiary nature of the stories we're being fed on all sides. Right. There's stories out there of the same nature that you're describing against Clinton and against Bernie Sanders and against, Jill Stein and, Johnson. Gary Johnson. I mean, so what we're all, again, it goes back to the concept of a second American Civil War, and that there's highly skilled people using propaganda to craft stories and to shade areas of truth to make everybody look like they're doing this thing to the other person. And I need to just, always remind myself not to get drawn into the media hubbub and all these things going on, so I can focus on my project. But it has to do with, questioning the incendiary nature of a lot of what we're being spoon-fed and digging into it for ourselves. Like if somebody says something about Trump or Clinton or anybody like that, I go to the source material and I start to look at it for myself and said, if I wasn't told that Hillary, passes out right there, would I think that she tripped? How did the Secret Service people act? What have you, right? The same thing with Trump. Like Trump's got as many, I wouldn't put him on the same level with Hillary, but neither one of them, in my opinion, is qualified to lead a country of free people.
Oh, I totally agree.
Neither one of them is serving life, freedom, and happiness. And those are kind of the priorities that I have in my life. I appreciate life, but life's not worth as much as having life plus freedom, and life plus freedom equals happiness, in my opinion.
Right. Well, that's, it's...
They don't represent that.
Right. We're supposed to have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Well, you don't have to pursue it if you actually appreciate and defend freedom and practice intellectual and physical self-defense. It emerges as a result.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, we had quite a few incidents. It wasn't just New York. We had New York, we had New Jersey, we had the stabbing in Minnesota, besides the cop murders. Do you think that these are all staged events? Not that they're not real events, but staged events to keep the fear going, or perhaps an October surprise?
Well, I wouldn't use the word staged, but I would use like the terminology of gardening. I'm not surprised that plants are growing in places where they've been fertilized by intelligence agencies and other people who profit from the chaos.
Oh, that's good. We can call them fertilizing events. I like that. I also wanted to ask, I know
it's like they find weeds and they irrigate them. How about that? That's a better metaphor.
Exactly.
They're like, oh, here's a good patch of weeds, and they irrigate it with our tax dollars, and then they're like, oh, we need more of your tax dollars to keep you safe from what we did with your other tax dollars. And that seems like a vicious circle of fraud and tyranny to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think that they're still going to sweep Hillary or her body double or whatever else crap is going around online? Do you still think they're going to put her in office?
Well, I think the corporations and the status quo hope she gets to office. because it's not that Trump doesn't have connections to the New World Order, and it's not like he didn't meet with Kissinger, and it's not like he didn't meet with Richard Haas, the chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations, and it's not like Trump doesn't have a Rhodes Scholar in the form of former CIA Director James Woolsey as one of his senior advisors, right? So he's not that far from the thing that Hillary represents. It's just that everyone else knows Hillary represents it a whole lot better and isn't looking to make a name for herself. She serves power. That's why she is where she is. That's why all these events like, mistakes in Libya and the fallout in Benghazi and all these other things, she can escape it because those other people in power that are surrounding her knows that she serves them.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, the Clintons have quite the long history of criminal behavior, to say the least. And yet we have two people that probably Donald Trump has so many cases against him, and yet these people are still running for office. It's like we got the worst of the worst among us.
Well, one of the metaphors that I had drawn in one of my episodes of The Deep End was that if you're going to have a crappy player on one side of Wimbledon, you need to put an equally crappy player across the other side. Otherwise, you're going to notice that it's a rigged game.
Right. Well, do you think this is a rigged game, as Trump says? Because I've always contended. I think he's just in it to push it to her, and surprisingly enough, it looks like they're in a dead heat right now.
Well, I'll give you the general first, and the general riggedness of it is the Electoral College, where your direct vote for president doesn't really matter, and all those Electoral College positions are handed out by people in power in the party of power usually. And the specific is that as soon as Donald Trump got into the race and was the candidate against Hillary, that they won because they're like Trump. The only difference is Trump isn't an espoused internationalist or globalist. Hillary is. She's a world federalist. You can just Google Hillary Clinton plus world federalism. You can see her presenting the award to Walter Cronkite, and he's also a world federalist. So that's a primary difference between the two candidates. They both have a tendency or, a proclivity for irrationality, exaggeration, and all sorts of misunderstandings and talking about things that will likely cause damage in a disconcerting way, and not do anything about that. So right. Trump, he's in favor of torturing people and all these things that have to do with the war on terror, not realizing that the war on terror is just it's a war on scare. They're scaring you to give up your rights, give up your liberty, give up your family's freedom, your grandchildren's freedom for things that are very superficial and transient.
Right. Well, I saw on regular TV news how they were bragging about capturing the supposed bomber in New York because of all the closed caption televisions and surveillance in New York. So they're we're pushing it as what a great thing this is, that we're watching every move everybody makes, but they didn't really talk so much about after he does the bombing, he just lays down in a hallway and waits for them to come pick him up.
Yeah, I mean, the news that was going across the tickers when I looked at it was, he was found asleep in the doorway of a bar, right. And then was questioned by police, and then got up, started to run away, and started shooting. And I'm like, this doesn't feel like that's what happens in reality, unless this guy was like the Imad Salem, who was the guy who taped his FBI handlers in 1993 about the World Trade Center bombing, and the FBI had given him a real bomb, and he was supposed to use a fake bomb, and they were having some contradictions there, conflicts. So maybe this guy who did these bombings, who had contact with the FBI a couple years ago, maybe he didn't go along the plan. Maybe he made himself easily found. I don't know what his motive was. I don't like right. That's going on out there with our tax dollars.
Right.
They're grooming the people that are causing all this havoc and chaos.
Exactly.
I find it beneficial. I think once we take away the benefits for them doing that, then they'll act differently.
Mm-hmm. Well, looking at Hillary, looking at Trump, it just looks like we're going to be in trouble no matter what. Okay. And
it's just different flavors. You can have chocolate or vanilla, but you're going to have one of those two flavors.
I know, but my thought is, and it's just my own belief, okay, my own thought, is that it would be more dangerous for Trump to become president than he realizes. because he can't be that stupid to think that he's going to be allowed to do anything he wants to do. And I don't think the people behind the curtain are going to take any crap off of him.
Well, I definitely, you know, if he gets in the, let's say he gets to be president, as soon as he appoints his cabinet, everything that Trump wants to do is going bye-bye, because his cabinet's going to be Council on Foreign Relations, people who support the Anglo-American establishment, people who follow the legacy of Cecil Rhodes' secret society to take America over, to merge it with the British Empire, and to take over the world. So the reason Americans participated in the plan was because it's a stepping stone to world power and them acting like gods and treating us like we're animals.
Like slaves. Well, you know, Jimmy Carter was a perfect example of that. You know, he came in with all kinds of promises, and then the CFR loaded his administration, and that was the end of whatever he thought he was going to do. But
yeah, but see, the thing is, in that case, and I don't know if it'll be the same case in Trump, but Carter was basically a stooge. He was used by Zbigniew Brzezinski and David Rockefeller, who plucked him and chose him, and the Trilateral Commission backed Jimmy Carter for president. And I believe this is in Barry Goldwater's book, With No Apologies, and it's chapter 33 is really good, but chapter 34 is where he talks about Rockefeller and Jimmy Carter and how it was a done deal before he even became president. So it could be that way with Trump. If you look at Trump's family history, I mean, he gets his money from his dad, Fred Trump, who was a real estate magnate. Trump's uncle, his name was John Trump, he became the custodian and the executor over Nikola Tesla's research and scientific writings after Tesla died in New York City. The government comes in, takes his safe, takes all this stuff. So there's all of that. I mean, that's just, you know, the generations before. And then you can watch, I think it was called Trump the Movie. There was a documentary on Donald Trump. And I got to say, like, no, if that's the worst about Donald Trump and you compare it to the worst of Hillary Clinton, I'm not going to vote for the lesser of two evils, because I don't believe in a system that, you know, your vote's connected to putting innocent people in cages and doing all these different things. But there's certainly a striking difference between the gangster history of Hillary Clinton and the gangster history of Donald Trump.
God, and this is out of 300 million people. These are the best we could find.
No, it's the people most useful to the Anglo-American establishment in creating the illusion that America is still a free country.
Right, nothing is free in this country. Not even air is free in this country. What about this Huma Abedin?
And nothing's really free. Nothing's really free in nature. You have to work for everything. So it's whether you're working in a system that uses a Rothschild-based currency, or if you're just, you know, working out in nature with natural law.
Right. Well, you know, sometimes you can get some oranges and lemons off somebody else's tree for free. So nature seems to be a much better place to be than reality. What do you think about this Huma Abedin, you know, Hillary's sidekick?
Well, I hadn't really thought of her too much until I was, we were doing a recent episode of The Deep End, and the Anthony Weiner story broke. And so we were talking about that. And at the end of the article, I learned that his wife was Huma Abedin. I was like, oh, that's that chick that works for Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. And then I started clicking other articles to figure out who is she and why is someone who's a Saudi representative basically working so close to Hillary. And I just started to learn more and more. And I thought, wow, like, Huma Abedin and Weiner were like a Bill Hillary clone couple, where, you know, the husband's off having his affairs or doing whatever, and this chick is the body woman of Hillary Clinton, and she's been very close to her since like 1996. And so it just raises all these questions about, you know, Huma Abedin said that she saw like Hillary using burn bags. And, like, you know, there's been proof that Hillary banged up, like, a bunch of her phones with a hammer. And these things contradict what she told the FBI director. But the FBI director used to sit on the board of Hong Kong Shanghai Opium Bank Corporation, HSBC. And so they had given $81 million to the Clinton Foundation. So there's no conflict of interest there between the FBI director and Hillary Clinton in that questioning. But no one ever mentions this in mainstream media. So everyone's like, oh, look at them ganging up on Hillary. And it's like, no, it's a totally controlled, like, you know, kid glove situation right there. right? And so I just, I'm a fan of the bigger picture and not just the little piece of theater they're showing on the stage. I want to look backstage, side stage, what's going on over the stage, what's under the stage, and have a true understanding of the nature of our world.
Well, the nature of our country is something that needs to be put under a microscope these days because it's unrecognizable to me. And I have to tell you, Richard, that, I live in a totally Republican town where everybody online has said they're voting for Donald Trump. But when I talk to the Republicans in town, and not a one of them wants either person. No one likes either choice, if you want to call it a choice. I keep telling people the only choice we have is Mexico or Canada.
Well, those are both beautiful countries, and I think we should all get along. I think there's various realms of oppression in basically every government that exists on the planet. And for a long time, it seemed like for at least some people, things were going pretty good in this country. And then, the ideas of being able to be prosperous or to run your own business or be an entrepreneur, I think that was flourishing while it was useful to the globalists. And once they got what they needed, they put a damper on it. And these are the symptoms that you see when you see how far our country has changed in the past several decades. So I think what we're also seeing, these symptoms, the root cause goes back to, I could give you a variety of resources on this, whether it's Charlotte Iserbyt or Norman Dodd, who was a whistleblower. But the idea was that the Carnegie Foundation, the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, these big nonprofits, and this continues today with the Clinton Foundation, the Gates Foundation, these are all intertwined. They wanted to merge our way of life with that of the Soviet Union, and that had to do with basically, taking all the profitability out of freedom, taking away, whittling away all the free time and carefree lifestyle that you could have in a realm of freedom, and get it back down to you need every ounce of your work to survive, and it's run more like a gulag state. And what you're seeing with the rise of security and police and homeland security and all these other things, the federal agencies giving money into your local areas, and you don't have direct accountability with the people that are there running the government. There's all these little things going on. But what I've always tried to point out in my work is there's a single cohesive plan, working groups, funding sources, and it makes a lot more sense when you can actually understand how all these different layers interplay with each other, rather than seeing it as a bunch of ongoing, unrelated events, and it's too complicated to understand. Because it's a finite planet. Things get pretty simple. There are people in power abusing their power, and they're only going to abuse their power more as we let them. Right. This is the story of human history.
Absolutely. So, what's your suggestion? I mean, here we have Hillary, Trump. You've got Johnson, and you got Jill Stein running for office. I got to tell you, I'm not impressed. I was a little more impressed with Jill Stein. Until she started slamming Bernie Sanders after she offered him the top spot on her ticket. So you kind of look at all of them as phonies and fairly ignorant people. That's the scariest part. I mean, all right, I'm not going to say Hillary is ignorant because she's been, a player in the scheme for so many years. But they're fairly ignorant people. Gary Johnson, they're interviewing him after the bombs go off in New York, and he said, well, at least nobody got hurt. I mean, these people are so disconnected from reality. And again, like you, Rich, I've been saying this to people since 2000. Your vote doesn't count. If it did, Al Gore would have been president and not Bush.
Well, and there's a Princeton study. I call it the Princeton oligarchy study, but it basically shows that there's no connection between the will of the people and what the government actually does. And like 85% of activities that government undertakes with the money they extort from everybody.
Exactly.
I don't call that that's not a healthy relationship.
No, absolutely not.
But just a quick point on Jill Stein. I saw what I thought was ironic and sad and funny all at the same time was there was a clip where Jill Stein was being interviewed, and then like CBS or ABC or whoever edited it in such a way to change what she's saying. And Lee Camp on RT, he did a great little short video where he was showing this, and I sent it to my dad, and he's like, that was funny. He's like, that's sad, but that was still funny, And so I think that the spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, and I think that the way that we can keep ourselves healthy is by having, a sense of humor about this political campaign.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, come on, they're all jokes.
I know. I read an article yesterday off one of the major newspapers. I don't remember which one, to tell you the truth, that actually said that there's such an increase in depression over this election, depression, anxiety, people running to their shrinks. The unhappiness, the nervousness around this election is unparalleled. That's what, professionals are saying.
Well, here's the flip side of that. So if what's going on out there is depression, here's the way to get a couple chuckles out of it. I have to sit around and wonder, what's the person you guys are going to vote for do to take away my freedoms? Because none of these candidates know how to build my freedom better than me, right? Mm-hmm. And so who's going to go out? You're going to vote for someone to go out there and make decisions on behalf of me who doesn't want to participate in that person who's, all these candidates, they can't have high IQs. They're not intellectually competent in a variety of ways. Hillary, her biggest thing is she was incompetent with the server, but we should let her have the nuclear football where she could launch nuclear missiles and stuff. Like, that doesn't make any sense. If we take her and her campaign at their word that she was incompetent and wasn't doing anything illegal with relation to the server and the 30,000 emails and the classified emails that James Comey said went on, it's like, if she's incompetent, then she's not qualified. And guess what? There are competent, hardworking, honest people in this country, and you're not seeing them in any of these campaigns. You have to ask why.
Right. Well, you're not allowed to. I mean, even to run locally, I remember telling you years ago when I was approached by the Democratic Party here in Arizona to run for office. I said, well, what seat? And they said, anyone you want. But the first thing you have to do is you need $1 million. And I'm like, right. Yeah, okay, let me just reach into my back pocket for that $1 million.
Well, they who print the money from nothing make the rules until you get to an understanding where you're not influenced by things that don't exist.
Exactly. Well, can't argue that. So we still get the Rothschild, Rockefeller pick. Speaking of the Rothschilds, I know you've got a new project going, and you're just starting a new Indiegogo campaign to get it off the ground. What are you doing now? Are you putting together a book on the Rothschilds?
Well, first, I took interest, this is probably 10, 12 years ago when I read in Carol Quigley's Strategy and Hope, it was like page 50 or 52, they talk about this Rothschild financial dynasty, this banking family. And I was like, gee, I just went through all this public school and university and, economics classes. No one ever mentioned this to me. This is pretty interesting. So then I tried to look it up on the internet, and all I saw was a bunch of conspiratorial, poorly formatted, poorly referenced pieces of information. I was like, oh, they must not really exist. This is kind of like a blip on the radar, and I was going to move on. And then I kept running into their names in other books that I was using for research. So I was like, well, let me see what kind of validity and veracity and history is out there. And I kind of made it a hobby over the next decade to collect every autobiography or biography about the Rothschilds or written by the Rothschilds, or any historical artifacts and documentation that kind of help to flesh out this international banking family that has controlled world finance for the past 300 years. And again, I talk to people on work on Wall Street, and they're down there making money. And like, hey, have you ever come across the Rothschild family? They look at you, they're like, no. What are you talking about? And so I was like, wow, this family that has all this influence and control sure does stay well hidden from the actual worker bees that are down here doing their thing. Mm-hmm. And so as I, compiled all these books, I always wanted to take all the information that pertains to the United States history and kind of fills in the gaps where they've left out gaps on purpose in our education. And I finally had the opportunity over the past 2 years to start writing chapters chronologically, using the best resources available, unless you're a billionaire, I guess. So right. I use the best resources available, and instead of it all being on my bookshelf and in my mind, I'm able to share it with others, and they can find those books. A lot of them are used, and you can find them relatively cheap. Some are very scarce. And I also try to tie that into research documents that are available on the internet, because some of these books have been scanned in and whatnot. And so it's a mixture. So it's like a blueprint or a manual to the resources that exist and are pertinent to learning about the Rothschild banking dynasty. And then, like I said, there's a ton of American history that changes with that that piece of information, that bit of knowledge. And it also ties in, of course, to the last will and testament of Cecil Rhodes and his goal to take over America, because he was funded by the Rothschild family. And his De Beers Diamond Syndicate was part of the holdings of the Rothschild family that we don't really ever hear about in American history.
Right. Well, we don't really get any real history, that's for sure. Rich, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about the book. So stay with us. Richard and I will be right back. Hi, this is Maria Heller. If you're enjoying this show, please consider listening to the rest of it, along with hundreds of other hours of education, by a small subscription on my site. Get over to meria.net, meria.net. You are the only thing that supports this show. There's no corporate control, and there's plenty of education on site. So please consider either a subscription or a donation to keep the work going. There are too many alternative voices out there that are being silenced because of lack of support. So if you don't want MSM to be the only mind-controlling news out there, please consider supporting the people that support you, and help us all save something for the future for our children. Thank you so much.